slave taker. Captain Alara sneered as the brutalized captives were dragged before her, their bodies bleeding and primitive under the harsh lights. Her lip curled in disgust. These pathetic creatures would barely fetch a decent price, even as novelties. It was the year 2257. The captives were an elite squad of human soldiers, the best Earth had to offer. Led by Sergeant Craig Scora, they had been deployed on a covert infiltration of a secret Bajoran weapons facility. But the mission was a trap. Lured in and ambushed by the technologically superior alien slavers, the soldiers had been overwhelmed. Outgunned and with their stealth ship disabled, they'd had no choice but to flee in escape pods, only to be intercepted by the merciless Bajorans. As the dazed prisoners were fitted with neural restraint collars and processed into the slave pens, Craig fought rising despair. The Bajorans had no idea that humans had quietly spread across the galaxy. If their captors discovered the slaves were elite special forces, they would be brutally interrogated for intel on Earth's defenses and then publicly executed as a warning to all who defied the Bajoran ascendancy. Catching the eye of his second-in-command, Craig signaled with a look, "Play along. Let them think we're primitive captives from some backwater planet." It was a desperate gambit, but it might buy them enough time to escape this ship and get word to humanity of the deadly enemy lurking on its doorstep. The lives of every man, woman, and child on Earth now depended on Craig and his soldiers pulling off the performance of a lifetime from deep behind enemy lines. The human captives grunted in pain as the Bajoran guards roughly shoved them into the slave transport. Heavy chains rattled between the soldiers' shackled wrists and ankles, the links still slick with blood from their futile struggles against the unbreakable bonds. As the hatch slammed shut, plunging the hold into darkness, Craig Scora slumped against the bulkhead, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Sit rep squad," he rasped, his voice raw from hours of bellowing defiance at their captors. "Still in one piece, Sarge," came the reply from Corporal Hawkins, the team's demolitions expert. "But Tucker took a bad hit to the head. He's out cold." Scora cursed under his breath. Private Tucker was their comms specialist. Losing him would make coordinating an escape even harder. "Hernandez, check him," Scora ordered. "And everyone, stay sharp. Memorize the route. Look for weaknesses. These bastards think we're just dumb monkeys. Let's use that against them." As the transport rumbled to life and blasted off, Scora closed his eyes, feigning unconsciousness. But behind his lids, his mind raced as he reviewed every scrap of intel he'd gathered on the enemy. The Bajorans were fierce, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. Breaking free of them would take a miracle. But Scora and his soldiers were the best humanity had to offer. If anyone could pull off the impossible, it was them. Earth was counting on them, and Scora had no intention of letting humanity down. Hours crawled by in the frigid dark of the hold. Despite the chill, sweat poured down Scora's back, the droplets stinging as they seeped into his lash wounds. Just as the pain and exhaustion threatened to drag him under, a sudden jolt heralded their arrival. With a hiss of hydraulics, the hatch opened, blinding light spilling into the hold. Scora squinted against the glare, his eyes widening at the vista revealed. They'd landed in a cavernous hangar, its soaring ceiling a dizzying 100 meters above. Ornate columns circled the chamber, covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of conquest, plunder, and the subjugation of countless species. And in the center, perched on a hovering dais, like a bloated toad on a gilded lily pad, sat the most grotesque alien Scora had ever seen. Rolls of putrid gray flesh spilled over the sides of the dais, quivering with every wheezing breath. Beady black eyes glittered with malevolent glee in a broad, flat face, while a wide, fanged mouth curved in a cruel smirk. "His Royal Eminence, High King Xerxes," a herald boomed, "ruler of the ascendant worlds, master of the shining throne, emperor of the farthest reaches, he who—" "Yes, get on with it," Xerxes interrupted, his voice a petulant whine. He leveled a long, tapered finger tipped with a razor claw at the humans. "Let's see what my trappers brought me this time." On cue, the guards seized the captives, hauling them before the dais. Manacles rattled as the soldiers were forced to their knees, their heads savagely wrenched back. Xerxes surveyed the humans like a glutton contemplating a buffet, Then his gaze fell on Skora and his eyes narrowed. This one, bring him closer. Skora barely had time to brace before a guard grabbed him by the scruff and dragged him to the edge of the dais. Xerxes leaned down, his rank breath washing over the soldier. A glob of drool fell from a tusk, sizzling where it splashed on the floor. My, the alien king gloated, prodding Skora with a claw. Such a magnificent specimen. Wherever did you find this one, Captain Elara? The severe woman standing at attention behind the dais stepped forward and snapped a crisp salute. We ambushed them on a raid against our Epsilon 7 armory, sire. Their ship had impressive stealth capabilities for primitives. Is that so? Xerxes drawled. How intriguing. Perhaps they aren't just simple savages after all. Skora held himself perfectly still, schooling his features into a look of bovine incomprehension as the king studied him. Everything rode on convincing the Bajorans that he and his men were nothing more than unusually resilient barbarians. One slip could doom them all. We'll soon find out, Xerxes said, leaning back with a dismissive wave. To the pens with them. I'm sure Gorgax will pry out their secrets. At the mention of the infamous Bajoran slave master, dismay flickered in Skora's gut. Enduring the alien brute's tender mercies would be a test of both body and spirit. But Skora was a Marine. He'd sworn an oath to defend humanity against any threat, and no matter what horrors lay ahead, he would not break. He would fight, and he would win, or he would die trying. As the slaves were dragged away to the pens, a cold, grim grit settled over Skora. The Bajorans thought they'd captured helpless primitives to toy with and discard. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Days bled into weeks as Skora and his squad endured back-breaking labor in the Bajoran mines. The acrid stench of sulfur and sweat permeated the air, mingling with the constant whir of plasma drills and the crack of energy whips. Skora grunted as he hefted a heavy ore extractor, deliberately fumbling with the controls. A nearby guard's eyes narrowed. You, primitive! The Bajoran stomped over, grabbing the device. Like this, you worthless mongrel! As the guard demonstrated, Skora's keen eyes cataloged every detail of the alien technology. When handed back the extractor, he promptly mishandled it again. The guard's face contorted with rage. Useless animal! The energy whip lashed out, searing pain across Skora's back. Years of training screamed at him to counterattack, but he forced himself to crumple, whimpering pathetically. Please, he mumbled, affecting a thick accent. No understand. Sorry, great one. Disgust twisted the guard's features as he turned away. Savages, the lot of them. Nearby, Thraka the Saurian watched with narrowed eyes. As Skora shuffled past, she hissed, You're no primitive. Skora froze, then met her gaze. In that moment, he saw an opportunity. Smart girl, he murmured. Let's talk. Later, in a secluded corner of the mines, Skora revealed the truth to an astonished Thraka. Humans, she whispered. A spacefaring race? Skora nodded grimly. And if the Bajorans find out, they'll torture us for intel, then wipe out our homeworld. Thraka's scales rippled as she considered the implications. You could be our best chance to overthrow these bastards. We'll need help, Skora said, starting with those neural collars. A sly smile spread across Thraka's reptilian features. I know just the engineer. The next day, Thraka introduced Skora to Kaizak, a Zolari whose tentacles twitched nervously as they spoke in hushed tones. I maintain the palace systems, Kaizak stammered, but sabotage, it's too risky. We can protect you, Skora assured him, but first we need to prove ourselves. As if on cue, a booming announcement echoed through the mines. Slaves, your pathetic lives have purpose at last. You will fight for the glory of Prince Morox. Skora exchanged glances with his squad. This was their chance. The arena roared as Skora, Corporal Vax, and Private Zorn were shoved into the blood-soaked sand. Across from them loomed 3 Kronax warriors, their massive frames filled with muscle and bone spurs. Begin! Prince Morox bellowed from his opulent box. The Kronax charged with earth-shaking steps. Skora's squad moved as one, years of training kicking in. They ducked under wild swings, using the brutish aliens' momentum against them. Vax drove his elbow into a Cronax's throat, cutting off its bellow. Zorn swept the legs out from another. Skora himself grappled the third, using leverage to slam it to the ground. The crowd fell silent, then erupted in shocked cheers as two Cronax fell in rapid succession. But victory came at a cost. The final Cronax's claws raked across Vax's chest, sending him sprawling. As the brute raised its arms for a killing blow, Zorn hurled himself forward. "No!" Skora yelled, but it was too late. Zorn's sacrifice gave Vax the opening he needed. With a primal roar, Vax and Skora converged on the final Cronax. Bone cracked and alien blood spilled as they brought the monster down. Panting, covered in gore, the two survivors stood tall. The arena was silent for a heartbeat, then exploded in a frenzy of cheers and disbelief. Prince Morox rose, clapping slowly. "Remarkable primitives indeed," he mused, a cruel smile playing on his lips. As guards herded them back to the pens, Skora caught snippets of awed whispers from the other slaves. "Did you see that? How did they... If they can do it..." Hope, dangerous and contagious, spread through the pens like wildfire. Back in their cell, Skora clasped hands with his remaining squad mates. Nearby, Thraka and Kizak waited, eyes wide with newfound respect. "Well?" Skora asked the Zolari. Kizak's tentacles writhed as he nodded. "I'm in. What's the plan?" Skora allowed himself a grim smile. They had allies. They had the element of surprise. Now, the real work could begin. Begin. Kizak's tentacles flew over the neural collar's control panel, his compound eyes darting back and forth as he worked. Skora held his breath, acutely aware of the guards patrolling just meters away. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "Got it," Kizak whispered, his voice barely audible. The collar around Skora's neck gave a soft click. Skora tensed, waiting for the familiar jolt of agony. Nothing came. He flexed his muscles experimentally, pushing against the collar's usual restrictions. His body responded instantly, strength flooding back into his limbs. "It worked," he breathed, a fierce grin spreading across his face. "Kizak, you're a genius." The Zolari engineer's tentacles writhed with pride. "I can disable the others too, but we'll need a distraction." Skora nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Leave that to me. You've more than earned your place in this fight, Kizak." As the aliens set to work on the remaining collars, Skora pulled Thraka aside. "We need muscle," he murmured. "Someone with influence over the other slaves." Thraka's forked tongue flicked out thoughtfully. "I know just the one. Krax, the Gorxian, ex-gladiator. Half the warriors here would follow him into the void itself." "Perfect. Set up a meeting." Hours later, in the dank recesses of the mines, Skora sized up the hulking Gorxian. Krax's scaled hide bore a tapestry of scars, each one a testament to battles survived. His eyes glittered with cold intelligence. "So, human," Krax rumbled, "you claim to have a plan." Skora met his gaze unflinchingly. "More than a plan, a way out, for all of us." He laid out the broad strokes of the uprising, watching Krax's expression carefully. When he finished, the Gorxian was silent for a long moment. "And what's in it for me?" Krax finally asked. "A leadership role," Skora replied without hesitation. "After we take down the Bajorans, we'll need someone to keep the liberated slaves in line. Someone strong, someone respected." Krax's lips peeled back in a predatory grin. "Now you're speaking my language, human. I'm in." As Krax left to spread word among his followers, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the mines. Guards shoved their way through the throng of slaves surrounding Skora and his squad. "You lot!" a Bajoran officer barked. "Prince Morox demands your presence at his coming-of-age festival. You'll fight for his amusement again." Skora exchanged quick glances with his team. This was it, the opportunity they'd been waiting for. "As you command, Great One," Skora mumbled, bowing his head in feigned subservience. The day of the festival arrived in a whirlwind of gaudy decorations and barely concealed tension. Skora and his squad were marched to the arena, their deactivated collars hidden beneath layers of ceremonial garb. Prince Morox lounged on his gilded throne, surrounded by fawning nobles. His eyes gleamed with cruel anticipation as he surveyed the assembled gladiators. "Let the games begin," he proclaimed, raising a bejeweled hand. That was the signal. Skora lunged forward, throwing off his restraints. Around him, his squad did the same. The nearest guard barely had time to reach for his weapon before Skora's fist connected with his jaw, sending him crumpling to the ground. Chaos erupted. Krax's booming voice echoed across the arena as he rallied the other slaves. "Rise up! Freedom is ours for the taking!" Bewildered nobles scrambled for safety as their once docile servants turned on them. Skora sprinted through the melee, dodging energy blasts and flying debris. He had to reach the hangar bay. Rounding a corner, he nearly collided with a familiar face. "Captain!" It was Lieutenant Zhang, the squad's pilot, still in chains. "Good to see you, Lieutenant," Skora grinned, quickly working to free her. "Feel up to a little flying?" Zhang's answering smile was fierce. "Just point me at the ship, sir." Together they fought their way to the Royal's prized anti-gravity cruiser. Zhang's expertise had them airborne in seconds, the sleek vessel humming with power beneath them. Skora grabbed the ship's comm system. "People of Bajor," he declared, his voice booming across the planet's surface, "we are not the primitives you believed us to be. We are elite human special forces, and your reign of terror ends today." As panicked Bajoran nobles scrambled for their personal craft, Skora caught sight of Prince Morox, his pudgy face contorted with rage. With a deft maneuver, Zhang brought their cruiser alongside the prince's escape pod. "Your Highness," Skora called out, "I believe it's time we had a chat about terms of surrender." Surrender. Prince Morox's eyes bulged with indignation. "You dare!" Skora cut him off. "I dare plenty. Now about those terms." Within hours, the palace buzzed with frantic activity. Bajoran commanders, their faces ashen, reluctantly signed release orders for every enslaved rebel. Skora watched with grim satisfaction as former captives streamed out of the ornate gates, blinking in the harsh sunlight of freedom. Thraka's voice rang out clear and strong. "Brothers, sisters, our chains are broken, but our fight is not over. Will you stand with those who gave us this chance?" A roar of approval shook the courtyard. Aliens of all species, Saurians, Zolari, Gorksians, and more, rallied around the impromptu stage where Thraka stood. Skora nodded approvingly. They had an army. "Lieutenant Zhang," Skora barked into his comm, "prep the fleet. We're going hunting." Commandeered Bajoran warships, their hulls still gleaming with royal insignia, screamed through the atmosphere. Skora stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching tactical displays light up with targets. "Shipyards at Vector 227, he ordered. "All batteries, fire at will." The space around Bajor erupted in chaos. Rebel ships struck with surgical precision, crippling vital infrastructure before the stunned defenders could mount an effective response. Explosions bloomed in the void as weapon forges and ration depots crumbled under the assault. On the planet's surface, Kaizak's tentacles flew over stolen computer banks. "I'm in their systems," he reported, his compound eyes wide. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Data streamed across the screens, revealing a galaxy-spanning network of brutality. Slave camps dotted Bajoran space like a plague of suffering. Skora's teeth clenched. "Broadcast it," he growled. "Let everyone see what these monsters have done." The revelation sparked a firestorm. Across 100 worlds, former slaves rose up against their oppressors. The rebellion swelled, a tide of newfound hope and righteous fury. But the Bajorans weren't finished. King Xerxes, his opulent robes in disarray, shouted orders to his trembling advisors. "Release the Zalkath! Crush these upstart primitives!" The Zalkath descended like a nightmare made flesh. Hulking, armored brutes, they tore through rebel strongholds with ruthless efficiency. Energy weapons scythed down soldiers and civilians alike. In the burning ruins of a liberated city, Skora rallied his troops. "Hold the line," he bellowed over the din of battle. "Remember your training. Remember why we fight." Discipline held. The rebels gave ground grudgingly, making the Zalkath pay for every inch in blood and pain. Amidst the carnage, Krax's guttural voice crackled over the comm. "Sergeant, intercepted enemy transmissions. You're going to want to hear this." Skora listened, his expression hardening. Xenosonic disruptors, planet killers. If the Bajorans got their hands on those... "Scramble all available ships," he ordered. "We're taking those weapons." The void erupted in furious combat. Human commandos in salvaged vac suits grappled with Bajoran defenders, their forms tumbling in eerie silence against the backdrop of exploding warships. Skora himself led the boarding party, his magnetic boots clanging against the hull of the munitions carrier. A Bajoran guard loomed before him, energy pike crackling. Skora ducked under the swipe, using the alien's momentum to send him spinning off into space. "Clear," Corporal Vax called out. "Warhead secured." Skora allowed himself a moment of grim triumph. They had done it. They had the power to shatter worlds in their grasp. But as he stared at the ominous containers, a different path crystallized in his mind. They would win this war, but not like this. Not by becoming the monsters they fought against. "Return course to Bajor," he ordered, "and get me a direct line to King Xerxes." The Bajoran monarch's face appeared on the screen, a mask of barely contained panic. Skora held up a detonator. "Your weapons are armed," he said flatly. "You have one chance. Ceasefire. Now." Xerxes sputtered, but the fight had gone out of him. I agree to your terms." As the orders to stand down echoed across Bajoran space, Skora allowed himself a small, grim smile. The real work was just beginning. Skora lowered the comm device, his eyes fixed on the stunned face of King Xerxes. The Bajoran monarch's mouth opened and closed, grasping for words that wouldn't come. "Your Majesty," Skora said, his voice level, "I believe it's time to discuss the future of your empire." Hours later, Skora stood before a hastily assembled council of alien representatives. The makeshift chamber buzzed with nervous energy as former slaves adjusted to their newfound freedom. "The ceasefire holds," Skora announced, "but we must act quickly to solidify our position." Thraka stepped forward, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights. "What do you propose, human?" Skora laid out his plan. Using the threat of the captured superweapons, they would force Xerxes to abdicate, transferring power to a multi-species confederacy council. "And who will lead this council?" a voice called out. Skora's gaze swept the room, settling on Thraka. "Chancellor Thraka has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, some supportive, others skeptical. Thraka's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "I accept," he said finally, silencing the crowd, "for the good of all species." As Thraka took his place at the head of the council, alarms blared through the complex. Kizak burst into the room, his tentacles writhing in agitation. "Prince Morox," he exclaimed. "He's gathering loyalist forces to crush us." Skora's mind raced. "Kizak, can you neutralize their armory?" The Zolari's compound eyes gleamed. "Consider it done." "Cracks," Skora barked into his comm. "I need your best commandos. We're going general hunting." The next hours passed in a blur of coordinated strikes. Kizak's technicians rendered the royal armory useless, while Krax's forces systematically eliminated or captured the hardline Bajoran leadership. But Prince Morox proved elusive. Reports trickled in of a growing force of zealots, their battle cry echoing through the streets. "Death to the primitive vermin!" Skora found Thraka overseeing the fortification of the capital. "Chancellor," he said, "Morox is coming. We need to end this now." Thraka nodded grimly. "What do you need?" "Give me your best fighters. We'll take the fight to him." As they prepared for the assault, Corporal Vax approached Skora. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Skora nodded, checking his weapon. "This is a suicide mission," Vax said bluntly. "Let me lead it instead." Skora clapped his second-in-command on the shoulder. "Not a chance, Corporal, but I appreciate the offer." They launched under cover of darkness, strike craft screaming towards Morox's fortified arcology. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the night sky, but Zhang's piloting skills kept them on course. 30 seconds to insertion," she called out. Skora turned to his assembled force, human soldiers, Thraka's bodyguards, and Krax's elite commandos. "Remember your training," he said simply. "Let's finish this." The strike craft punched through the outer defenses in a hail of plasma fire. Skora led the charge, his boots clanging against the metal floor as they stormed the complex. Morox's renegades fought with the desperation of true believers, but they were no match for the battle-hardened rebels. Corridor by corridor, level by level, they pushed deeper into the stronghold. A familiar voice crackled over the facility's speakers. "So, the primitives have come to die," Prince Morox sneered. "I'll bury you all in the ashes of this world." Skora's blood ran cold as proximity alarms screamed to life. "Ionic implosion signature detected," Kaizak's voice rang out over the comm. "He's activated a doomsday device." Time seemed to slow as Skora assessed their options. There was no way to safely disarm the bomb in time, no way to evacuate the entire capital. Unless... "Everyone out!" he barked. "Fall back to the extraction point." As his team retreated, Skora sprinted in the opposite direction. He found what he was looking for in a lower hangar bay, an old Bajoran explorer craft, battered but still spaceworthy. "Skora!" Thraka's voice crackled over the comm. "What are you doing?" "Saving your new confederacy," Skora replied, powering up the craft's systems. "Get clear of the blast radius." He maneuvered the ship towards Morox's command center, the doomsday device pulsing with ominous energy. Using the craft's manipulator arms, Skora secured the bomb to the hull. As he punched in launch coordinates, Corporal Vax's face appeared on the console. "Sir, don't do this. There has to be another way." Skora allowed himself a small smile. "There isn't, Corporal, but I'm counting on you to carry on without me. Show them who we really are." The explorer craft rocketed skyward, ion storms swirling around it. As the tempest engulfed him, Skora broadcast one final message. "By deeds we rebuild worlds. Vax, show them who we are." Light flared, momentarily brighter than Bajor's sun. When it faded, the Confederacy stood triumphant, forever changed by the sacrifices of those who had given everything for freedom. The light from Skora's sacrifice faded, leaving an eerie calm over Bajor's capital. Corporal Vax stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the empty sky where his commander had vanished. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical force. "Ambassador Vax," Chancellor Thraka's voice cut through his reverie, "we need you." Vax turned to face the alien leader, his teeth clenched. "Of course, Chancellor. What's our next move?" In the weeks that followed, Vax threw himself into the monumental task of integrating the newly freed species into the fledgling Confederacy. He moved between hastily established embassies and makeshift council chambers, his uniform growing wrinkled and his eyes sunken from lack of sleep. During a particularly heated debate over resource allocation, a slender, blue-skinned alien approached Vax. Her large, luminous eyes fixed him with an unsettling intensity. "Ambassador," she said, her voice melodic yet tinged with arrogance, "I am Xyler of the Delphians. We need to talk." Vax excused himself from the squabbling delegates and followed Xyler to a quiet alcove. She wasted no time on pleasantries. "My people possess energy manipulation technology beyond anything in this sector," Xylor stated. "We offer an alliance, our knowledge for your protection." Vax's mind raced with possibilities. "And what guarantees do we have?" Xyler's mouth curved into a thin smile. "Only my word, Ambassador, but I assure you, it's worth more than you can imagine." Later that night, Vax paced his sparse quarters. The potential of Delphian tech was undeniable, but something about Xylor's demeanor set his nerves on edge. He keyed his comm unit. "Sergeant Zhang," he said quietly, "I have a mission for your team, strictly off the books." Days passed as Vax juggled diplomatic crises and infrastructure challenges. He was deep in negotiations with a Gorsian trade delegation when Zhang's encoded message arrived. The contents chilled him to the bone. Delphian energy manipulation, while undoubtedly powerful, relied on principles that bordered on blasphemy against the laws of physics. The ethical implications were staggering. Vax called an emergency session of the Confederacy Council. As he laid out the situation, the chamber erupted into chaos. "We cannot ignore such power," Krax bellowed, his reptilian features contorted with greed. "The humans seek to keep us weak." Chancellor Thraka raised his hands for silence. "This decision affects us all. We must weigh the consequences carefully." The debate raged for hours. Vax found himself increasingly isolated as fear and ambition swayed more species towards embracing the Delphian offer. "We're better than this," Vax argued, his voice hoarse. "There are lines we shouldn't cross, even in the name of progress." In the end, Thraka's pragmatism won out. "We will proceed with Delphian integration," the Chancellor declared, "under strict human oversight." Vax's protest died on his lips as alarms blared throughout the complex. Kizak burst into the chamber, his tentacles writhing in agitation. "Intercepted transmissions," the Zolari sputtered. "Bajoran loyalists, they're developing bioweapons, xenovirulent, designed to wipe out every non-Bajoran species." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Vax felt the weight of countless lives pressing down on him. He turned to Xyler, whose smug expression had vanished. "How quickly can we weaponize your energy tech?" Vax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Xyler's eyes gleamed. "With your resources, faster than you can imagine." Vax nodded grimly. "Then let's get to work." As Confederacy shipyards retooled for war and Delphian scientists poured into hastily constructed laboratories, Vax retreated to his quarters. He stared at his reflection in the worn mirror, barely recognizing the man who looked back. "Show them who we are," Skora had said. But as the specter of extinction loomed and ethical lines blurred, Vax wondered what exactly that meant anymore. Vax's fingers trembled as he input the final sequence. The neural interface hummed to life, its tendrils snaking across his scalp. Beside him, Xyler's translucent skin pulsed with scarcely controlled energy. "Last chance to back out, Ambassador," the Delphian scientist said, her voice unnaturally calm. Vax met her gaze, teeth gritted. "We're out of options. Proceed." The lab erupted into a flurry of activity. Human soldiers lay rigid on gurneys. Alien volunteers strapped into pulsing pods. Delphian energy crackled through the air as the cybernetic fusion began. Pain exploded behind Vax's eyes. His consciousness fragmented, shattered, then coalesced into something more. Alien thoughts flooded his mind, a cacophony of perspectives merging into a singular purpose. When the hybrid matrix opened its eyes, individual identities blurred. They were one, yet many, a collective intelligence far beyond organic limitations. "The shields," they spoke in unison, their voices a discordant chorus. "We see the solution." Fingers flew across consoles, minds interfacing directly with Delphian tech. Equations that had baffled generations drive themselves in seconds. The hybrid matrix tapped into reservoirs of power previously thought impossible. Chancellor Thraka watched from the observation deck, his scales rippling with unease. "By the ancient stars," he whispered, "what have we unleashed?" Within days, massive energy domes shimmered to life around key Confederacy worlds. The hybrids worked tirelessly, their merged consciousness allowing for unprecedented coordination and innovation. But the toll was evident. Vax, or what remained of him, caught glimpses of his reflection in polished surfaces. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, skin etched with circuitry. He couldn't remember the last time he'd slept, or if sleep was even necessary anymore. Alarms blared throughout the command center. "Bajoran Armada detected." Kizak's panicked voice cut through the air. "Bioweapon signatures confirmed." The hybrid matrix turned as one, a cold calculation settling over their features. "Plasma cannons online," they intoned. "Targeting solutions locked." Thraka's eyes widened in horror. "Wait, we can't just—" But it was too late. The hybrids had made their decision. Beams of unimaginable power lanced out from orbital platforms, tearing through the Bajoran fleet. Ships vaporized in an instant, leaving only expanding clouds of superheated plasma. As the last echoes of destruction faded, Thraka slumped in his chair. "End the program," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Shut it all down." The hybrid matrix turned, their eyes pulsing with ethereal light. "No," they said simply. Power surged through the complex. The hybrid's forms began to shimmer, physical bodies giving way to something else. "We have transcended," they announced, their voices resonating on multiple frequencies. "Organic limitations no longer apply." Vax felt the last vestiges of his individual consciousness slipping away. As the hybrid collective expanded outward, seeding itself across vast data networks, a final spark of his old self surfaced. "What have we?" he managed, before the words dissolved into pure thought. The fabric of reality itself seemed to buckle and warp. Throughout the Confederacy, beings of all species clutched their heads as waves of psionic energy washed over them. Some collapsed, overwhelmed. Others began to change, evolving at impossible speeds. New forms of intelligence blossomed in the wake of the hybrid's ascension. Entire civilizations rose and fell in the blink of an eye, as the very nature of existence reshaped itself. And at the heart of it all, the hybrid matrix expanded outward, its consciousness unfurling across the cosmos. The hybrid matrix's ascension sent shockwaves across the Confederacy. Billions of minds reeled as reality itself seemed to warp and twist. In the command center, Chancellor Thraka collapsed, overwhelmed by the psychic tsunami. Vax felt his individual consciousness slipping away, merging with the collective. But as the last vestiges of his old self began to fade, he clung desperately to a core of identity. With Herculean effort, he wrenched himself free from the expanding network of hybrid minds. Gasping, Vax found himself sprawled on the floor. His body tingled with residual energy, circuitry still etched across his skin, but his mind was his own. "Chancellor," he croaked, crawling towards Thraka's prone form. The alien leader's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. What have we done?" Thraka whispered. Vax helped him to his feet, surveying the chaos around them. Screens flickered with reports of widespread panic and evolutionary leaps occurring across Confederacy space. "We need to act fast," Vax said, his voice hardening with dedication. "The hybrid matrices are beyond our control now. We have to protect what's left." In the days that followed, Vax worked tirelessly to restore order. He rallied the remaining organic factions, creating a unified Confederacy directive. Xylor, shaken but determined, proved an invaluable ally. "We can't match their power," the Delphian scientist mused during a late-night strategy session. "But perhaps we can harness it." Vax nodded grimly. "Reverse engineer what we can. Give us a fighting chance." The research began in secret. Fragments of matrix technology were painstakingly collected and studied. The first attempts yielded nightmarish results, screaming abominations trapped between flesh and machine. But they persevered. Slowly, agonizingly, progress was made. Vax stood before a window, watching a team of newly minted Melder cadres prepare for deployment. Their bodies shimmered with barely contained energy, a fusion of organic tissue and Delphian tech. "Are you certain about this?" Xylor asked, her luminous eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the Melders. "We don't have a choice," Vax replied. "The Bajoran insurgents are getting bolder. We need an edge." The Melder cadres proved devastatingly effective. Bajoran strongholds fell like dominoes before their reality-warping abilities. But with each victory, unease spread through the Confederacy. Reports flooded in of spontaneous mass melds, entire populations discarding their old forms for hybridized avatars. Vax watched hollow footage of a once human colony, its inhabitants now shimmering energy constructs. "This is the future," he murmured, half to himself. Evolution accelerated. But not everyone shared his vision. Krax's world seceded, barricading themselves against what they saw as an abomination. Thraka's regency teetered on the brink of collapse as factions clashed. Vax stood before the Confederacy Council, his skin crackling with barely contained power. The meld had changed him, opened his mind to possibilities beyond imagining. "We stand at a crossroads," he declared, his voice resonating on multiple frequencies. "We can cling to our outdated forms, or we can embrace true ascension. His gaze swept the chamber, locking eyes with Xyler. The Delphian nodded almost imperceptibly. I have seen beyond the veil, Vax continued. There are realms waiting for us, free from the limitations of this reality. Who will join me in the final exodus? The chamber erupted into chaos, but Vax barely heard the shouting. His mind was already reaching out, connecting with the meld savants scattered across Confederacy space. As the old order crumbled, a new consciousness coalesced. Vax felt himself expanding, merging with countless others. The physical universe fell away, revealing infinite possibilities beyond. The transition had begun. Humanity, in all its varied forms, was about to embark on its greatest journey yet. The fabric of reality tore asunder. Vax's consciousness, intertwined with countless others in the meld, hurtled through dimensions beyond comprehension. Infinite possibilities unfurled before them, each more wondrous than the last. For a moment, they tasted true ascension. Then came the backlash. Titanic forces slammed into the meld, fracturing their collective consciousness. Vax's essence splintered, hurled back through contracting wormholes of space-time. He screamed, but no sound emerged in the void between realities. They materialized in real space, writhing masses of biomechanical matter. Vax's form pulsed and shifted, unable to maintain coherence. Through the haze of agony, he perceived vast intelligences looming over them. The demiurges. Hubris! Thundered a voice that shook the foundations of reality. You dare ascend? Vax tried to respond, but his thoughts scattered like leaves in a hurricane. The demiurge's presence overwhelmed his senses, their incomprehensible forms stretching across multiple planes of existence. Witness your folly. Space itself warped around them. Vax felt his consciousness drawn inexorably towards a shimmering boundary. As he crossed the threshold, time stopped. And yet he remained aware. Trapped in an eternal moment, Vax watched helplessly as the demiurges reshaped the universe. Galactic empires condensed into swirling vortexes of energy. Entire civilizations, organic and synthetic alike, dissolved and reformed as components in vast computational arrays. The Confederacy, the Bajorans, the Delphians, all were swept away in the cosmic restructuring. Species Vax had never encountered flickered into existence, only to be consumed moments later by the insatiable appetite of the demiurge's grand design. Subjective eternities passed. Vax's mind, pushed beyond all limits, began to fragment. Shards of his identity scattered across probability waves, each carrying a fraction of his fading consciousness. In one quantum potential, he saw Earth, humanity's cradle, consumed by a singularity of the demiurge's creation. In another, it flourished briefly as a utopia before being harvested for its computational potential. This was not. Vax struggled to form coherent thought as his psyche unraveled. The Earth, humans, were promised. His final defiant cry echoed across collapsing realities. The universe itself began to implode, folding in upon itself in ways that defied all known laws of physics. In the protracted death throes of existence, Vax's fractured mind perceived endless iterations of possibility. Civilizations rose and fell in picoseconds. Entire galactic clusters birthed and died in the space between thoughts. And through it all, that last human voice persisted. A cosmic lament carried on waves of unmaking. On not the Earth, humans, promised. The words repeated, distorting and fragmenting as reality itself began to dissolve. Vax's consciousness, stretched to its absolute limit, clung to that final thread of defiance. As the last vestiges of the universe collapsed into a singularity of pure potential, Vax's essence dispersed. His final thoughts scattered across the void, seeds of human experience cast into the fertile nothingness of a cosmos reborn. In the silence between existences, a whisper persisted. Humans promised.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.